But the concept that you believe that it can be morally justified to violate a right means that you don't believe in it as a right. You just
Fabian, we're not saying we don't mean the same thing when we say morally justified, because when you say morally justified, you're making an is statement. It is morally justified to do this because non-aggression principle. I'm making an ought statement.
You made the fucking statement that you could violate those rights and that it could potentially be good.
Yes, because again, we mean different things by morally justifiable. When I say morally justifiable, I'm talking about maximizing utility. When you say morally justifiable, you mean it's a descriptive statement, not an ought statement. It's not a normative statement. It's a descriptive statement.
I mean that it has to be universalizable, so you can't call something a fucking right and then say that it is morally good to violate said right.
Again, when you say all this stuff about stealing, you're jamming into your definition of stealing your theory of entitlement. You don't believe that the government is entitled to things that people make because you believe what people make, or people should own what they produce. That's the theory of entitlement. That's not a theory. That's not a theory. But you recognize that is a theory of entitlement.
It's my theory of rights. Yes. It's a negative right. Yes.
Which you believe comes from your theory of entitlement. I have a different theory of entitlement. I believe we should entitle people to things that are welfare maximizing. No, I don't think it follows. No, I don't think that follows. You saying that like Hitler incorrectly.
So then Hitler didn't violate any rights.
I think the rights that Hitler supported were not utility maximizing. I don't see why it necessarily follows that rights therefore have to exist independently of what the state provides or whatever. There are things I think the state can provide that are utility maximizing. There are things I think the state doesn't provide that aren't utility maximizing. There are also issues with positive externalities. If healthcare is too expensive, people don't go get preventative care. They stay sick more often. They don't show up to work. They are less productive.
Hold on, pause. If I rape you, right? If I bend you over, I'm 6'5". I've done some martial arts. I've been in the army. I've been through quite a few scruffles and scraps. I've been homeless. I've had to do quite a few things. I'm pretty sure I could rape you if I could get hard, right?
If you want to see more content like this, I would really appreciate you liking and subscribing. It really helps with the algorithm. And make sure to check out the Discord and other social links in the description.
All right, go ahead. You got between 5 to 7 minutes would be the optimum. If you go over 7, I'm cutting you off.
All right, fair enough. Healthcare is not a human right. To claim so is a claim that contradictions are true, as healthcare requires the labor and resources of other people, and if it is indeed a right, it is a right or entitlement that infringes upon the liberty of others, or a positive right. Positive rights are not a freedom or liberty, but instead imposed upon others with violence. In other words, for healthcare to be a, quote, right, you must deny the right of bodily autonomy, property rights, freedom of association, and for individuals to negotiate wages and prices for their skills, labor, and property. If healthcare and positive rights are to be justified, one must claim that men do not have liberty to act according to their own volition and may be forced into slavery for the greater good. Thus, the claim that healthcare is a human right is a claim that might makes right and is a contradiction with human rights. If enough people collectively decide that you have too much money, they can steal it at any point of a gun, and then turn those same guns on hospitals, doctors, nurses, and more to force them into servicing those that they do not wish to treat, force them to cut costs, force them to divest in research, and force them to set their prices. The concept that healthcare is a human right is not based on logic or inalienable rights, rather it is based on using violence for presumed outcomes. It is consequentialist nonsense that attempts to run from the fact that their position is that the power of politicians and guns make what is right and wrong. But the devil is in the details, and the devil deserves his due. Most people can agree that healthcare is expensive, that many lose in the game of life, unable to afford basic care they need to thrive. How ought we deal with this reality? At first, a small tax increase to subsidize care, or better yet, doing away with the capitalistic healthcare system that preys on those without the funds to fight insurance claims, and that uses a profit model on a good that is essentially infinitely elastic, is a good idea. After all, it's not like you can shop around for the cheapest surgeon with the best Google reviews to remove a bullet from your lung. The violent consequentialist that believes might makes right will argue the system is broken and we ought to sacrifice a portion of our wages and property to gain access to affordable health care and to subsidize those less fortunate so that they can have the opportunity to recover from their ailments and become productive members of society and our economy, all leading to a more productive and moral society. Everyone benefits from this. It's a nice sentiment if you ignore the axioms, and even a better fantasy. First, I'll acknowledge our healthcare system is broken. It is far too socialist, a Frankenstein's monster. Healthcare used to be private enterprise of family doctors who catered to the rich, but with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, many workers soon banded together to form the lodge system. These disgusting working class people began to form collective associations that paid for doctor services and negotiated wages with the powerful elite. So the AMA was created in 1847 to fight this influence, and since 1910 has been a pseudo-government organization limiting the graduation of medical professionals in America. Healthcare is the most regulated industry in America, from the FDA, CMS, HHS, NIH, state boards, the Joint Commission, OIG, NPPD, and on and on. Insurance companies are forced to cap profits, accept terminally ill patients, and still have a fiduciary responsibility to the very state-based pensions that fund them. Medicare and Social Security programs are too long and complex to list and drive up costs to no end. Hell, hospitals can't even legally be built in most states without years-long certificate of need boards. But even though the American healthcare system is a mixed and regulated market, it still offers lower prices, superior outcomes, and innovation than European-style socialized medicine. The socialists will argue that the ends justify the means. But what are the ends? No one can predict the future, and the choice to violate human rights with the creation of socialized healthcare should never be based on outcomes, price, or innovation. Nevertheless, the socialists will claim that programs like the NHS are cheaper than American healthcare, and thus save us all money. This is a lie. Data on healthcare costs is highly influenced by academics, government officials, and benefactors of the current system, i.e., the rich and powerful. They often cite the price of healthcare instead of the actual cost. Insurance companies rarely pay the black book price of hospital services. In fact, the only people who regularly pay the full price are you, through Medicare. Furthermore, Cadillac health insurance plans and medical freedom mean that union workers offer superior healthcare plans in private hospitals, and millionaires spend millions on experimental interventions. Data is again scarce, but likely well over $1 billion in medical debt led to bankruptcy each year in America, with over $220 billion in medical debt existing in 2021, which is, of course, passed on to others who do pay. That's part of the cost. American healthcare offers supreme outcomes compared to other countries. When comparing like demographics, America is ahead of the world in infant mortality, life expectancy, and other metrics. Yes, we have unique circumstances with gang violence and mass immigration that pushes down statistics. So what about those left behind? In 2009, a Harvard medical study estimated that upwards of 45,000 Americans die from lack of access to health care, and nearly 18,000 people in America die on waiting lists for care. A sad statistic, to be sure. That's potentially 63,000 dead Americans. And while there is a large overlap in these categories, let's assume they're all unique citizens. So let's compare that metric to the estimated 120,695 people who died in the UK on waiting lists in 2022. Recent studies suggest the number may have been doubled in 2023. But let's stick with these. There are currently 67 million people living in the UK and 331 million people living in the US. This means that per capita rates of deaths from lack of insurance and death on waiting lists combined is over 9 times higher in the UK than in the US, even when we stretch the numbers to the highest possible estimates for the US and the lowest possible estimates for the UK. Even with our unique gun deaths and a country that is bordering on morbid obesity, you have over 9 times more likely to die from the NHS than you will be from the American healthcare system. I'll skip this next paragraph. We'll get into it later. In summary, healthcare is not a human right. It is a socialist claim to might makes right based off of faulty reasoning and poor evidence. It is a contradiction that is not only false, but evil, claiming that man ought be enslaved and stolen from by the point of a gun so long as enough people can be led to believe that it is a right. It has no logical grounding, even though its own obsession with empirical evidence and belief that ends justify the means. The argument falls flat to show that anyone's life would be improved by treating healthcare as a human right. Even if it were not a false statement to claim that healthcare is a human right, I would prefer to live in a country where some 9 times more people will die from poor care, ballooning national debt when we're already $37 trillion in debt, and a loss of innovation leading to countless future deaths. Healthcare is not a human right.
All right. Actually, you were shorter than Lactoid. So, I lied. Lactoid's still longer. All right. Let me just reset this here. And whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I entail negative rights of people because I think it improves society. In the same way, I entail positive rights of people because I also think that they can improve society. So the way I interpret prompt is essentially, is society better off with some type of universal health care? To which I think the answer is yes. There's a lot of goods I don't think people are entitled to, like a new PS5. The cost of providing everyone with a new PS5 is very high, not just in dollars, but in the market inefficiencies you're going to cause. The benefit's also pretty small. A lot of people would barely benefit at all just because they don't play video games or they already have their preferred system. But with necessities, however, I think society overall works a lot better and suffering is generally reduced if we ensure some minimum amount of access to it. With a lot of other necessities, we already do this to some extent with things like food stamps and income security programs. We could do it with healthcare via public option or a single-payer system. Ensuring equitable access to healthcare, it's something I'm willing to pay some price for in terms of market inefficiencies. Luckily, I don't think the cost here is that high because the market for health insurance and healthcare fails for a few reasons. There's barriers to entry, there's information asymmetries, there's positive externalities, there's inelastic demand, in some cases arguably even perfectly inelastic demand. When Fabian says people aren't entitled to healthcare because it requires stealing from other people, he's jamming in his definition of entitlement into his definition of stealing. Taxing someone is only aggressive if you believe the money being taxed belongs to the person it is being taxed from. That's a claim about entitlement, not a claim about aggression. I'm done.
Is that it? Okay,
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. I just got me there. All right, cool. Let's open it up. Y'all can go at it.
I think it would be best if we first start the first portion on the philosophical grounds of what is a right, right? And then maybe we can move into potentially an internal critique of your position, right? Which is that the outcomes or the ends justify the means. Is that fine by you?
Sure. I don't know how far we'll get with that, but sure.
Well, I mean, like at a certain point, we should cut it off because the philosophy just gets too boring. But
Don't
my
worry about
question
that.
is,
I got you on that. Papa.
Sure, but where I think this is
fair
going
enough.
is you're going to tell me that you believe that we do have some rights, and the claim that I'm going to make in response is that if your system is just claiming that we do have rights, that liberty is a right, it doesn't really tell me what I ought to do about that right, and that just is not a very solid
You're
ethical
correct.
framework.
Negative
for me.
rights don't make negative rights do not make ought claims. That is correct. They don't claim to make ought claims. That's why in my opening statement I said, what ought we do about this problem, right? Because there are plenty of ought things that you can do about this problem, right? But your claim is that healthcare is a human right. And then your definition of a right is an entitlement, I presume, an entitlement. Like, where does that entitlement come from? Is a utilitarian calculus? Like, how are you calling something a right whilst denying the existence of rights?
Well, I deny the existence of rights.
Traditionally defined.
I said in my opening, I deny the existence of rights. It's like as an intrinsic thing that just exists. But with a utilitarian moral framework, I think there are norms that we can establish that make society overall better off. Some of that is negative rights. Some of that also is positive rights, like a right to education or a right to healthcare.
An ethical norm is not a right.
Well, if you don't want to call it,
those are two different things. So you agree with me that healthcare isn't a human right because you don't have a concept of rights based off of the definition. Like,
well, you're defining rights in your own way,
and we're having a different discussion.
I don't see why rights necessarily have to be something that's like intrinsically true. I think rights can just as easily be something provided to people by a state or by a constitution. I don't see why we have to use your special definition of rights.
Okay, so you agree that you are positing the fact that might makes right. That if enough people get together and use violence and force, or potentially argumentation with a latent background effect of violence and force, that if enough people get together and force that, they can choose what rights are and what rights aren't. So you would agree, for example, and I know this is such an internet meme, but I'm going to do it anyways because it's funny, right? Like, you would agree that like Hitler didn't violate the rights of the Jews when he put them in internment camps and killed 6 million of them, give or take a few numbers in case there's a few spurgs in chat, right? You would agree that that was not a violation of human rights, that it was actually perfectly fine what he did because he was democratically elected and he had the will of the people under his democratic election, and he did so with a government that had that goal.
Well, I don't think it follows that just because some rights are provided by states that it follows that those rights are the utility maximizing rights. Like I would say, generally we should try to maximize human well-being.
Okay.
Obviously, the rights that Hitler provided did not do that because the rights explicitly allowed him to kill Jews and homosexuals and disabled people. Okay,
so your claim is actually that rights do exist. Objectively speaking, there is a right, and that right is based upon we're attempting to guess with utilitarian calculus what those rights are. So you believe that through utilitarianism there is a convergence here where we're actually discovering rights that do exist independent of what the state does.
Well, I don't see why they would have to exist independently.
Let me ask this. I just want to ask this because I think this is going to tie in to Nonfon. I'll let you ask this because Nonfon, if you could correct me or if I said this, quote you wrong, but you said what was it? Societal norms or societal whatever becoming rights. You said there's not really a substantive difference at some sort of standard. And right now you're talking about discovering rights, which was the question I was going to ask. Fabian, is there a sense that all rights have all been discovered? Or does, like, over time, new rights can be developed based off whatever? I'll let y'all go from there. I would like all that cleared up. We can start with you, Non-Fry, and then go back to Fabian here.
I mean, I guess,
To me or to him? Yeah.
Go, let him go first, then you go.
saying like discovering rights kind of like presupposes that like rights are this like kind of magical independent thing that exists. I don't see why that necessarily has to be the case. I just think that there are entitlements and rights that we can afford to people in society that are utility maximizing. I also think that there are things that we give to people in society that are not utility maximizing. I support giving people the ones that I believe are utility maximizing that lead to the best outcomes based on probabilistic knowledge, as Fabian will love to point out. If Fabian believes that they're
here's the problem.
Intrinsic magical.
Here's the problem, right? Is that, they're not magical. They are intrinsic. And the reason I believe they're intrinsic is, going to be a much, much longer conversation about, my libertarian philosophy that I don't think is helpful here, right? But I just want to state, right? Like, you agree that Hitler incorrectly guessed via the utilitarian calculus what the correct right was. So the right is independent from the politicians, independent from democracy, independent from the will of the people. That there is a right that exists, that is a rule out there somewhere, that if you follow this rule will be under your utilitarian calculus, happiness or whatever arbitrary means by which you view is a positive outcome, that it exists independent from what the state does and independent from the policies that it has.
No, I don't think it follows. No, I don't think that follows. You saying that like Hitler
so
incorrectly.
Then Hitler didn't violate any rights.
I think the rights that Hitler supported were not utility maximizing. I don't see why it necessarily follows that rights therefore have to exist independently of what the state provides or whatever. There are things I think the state can provide that are utility maximizing. There are things I think the state doesn't provide that aren't utility maximizing. This just doesn't follow. You saying that like Hitler incorrectly guessed what the correct rights were equates to me for just saying like Hitler did something immoral. And like, I agree, buddy. Good job.
So by your definition, by your framing of this, right? You're saying Hitler didn't use the right rights. He didn't give the right rights. That
he did not give utility maximizing rights. Yes.
Exactly. So there's only two options here as far as that conversation goes. Either A, which I've presented before, which is that rights exist independent of the state, and that whatever the thing is that is utility maximizing, a rule that you could create for society that is utility max exists, and the state can get it wrong, and that is an objective metric out there somewhere. You deny that there isn't a right answer, right? Which I don't know how you could claim that there isn't a right answer, because you would be arguing for a right that doesn't currently exist, which is healthcare as a human right, or B, right? So that would be a contradiction in your own argument, and thus you would lose the debate.
Here's what we're gonna do. Here's what we're gonna do.
B. Hold on, let me finish. Let me finish my argument.
I'm gonna let you finish. Here's what I'm just saying. I want you to finish. I'm gonna let him rebuttal, and then if we can't agree to right, then I'm gonna define right. So go ahead, you finish. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. So, or B, if Hitler discovered, gave the wrong rights, what you were saying is that rights are simply an amorphous thing that the state determines, and that those can be the right rights or they can be the wrong rights. And by that definition, a right has become meaningless to the term right and is now being redefined as policies that the state puts forward and claims are rights. And so the state could claim anything as a right, and you would say that meets the definition of a right. And therefore, your argument isn't healthcare is a human right. Your argument is we ought to have socialized healthcare because I believe that it's utility maximizing. And you're kind of just dispensing with the entire concept of rights. So which way would you prefer to lose this debate?
Well, I mean, I obviously don't think it follows. When you say like the rights, again, I think rights are something that can be entailed to people by society. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a state. That certain rights are going to maximize utility more than other rights. I'm going to support giving people the rights, entitling them to things that I think are utility maximizing. I don't think it follows that just because the state Gibbs rights that lets them kill Jews, that those were the wrong rights in the sense that there are like rights that objectively exist that are like the correct rights. They just weren't utility maximized.
Healthcare is a human right. Healthcare is a human right, right? That's your argumentation here. I gave you the two domains. You said, I don't think it logically follows, and then you just didn't actually explain why it doesn't logically follow, because I used your own logic in both of those examples. But setting that other victory aside, right? Healthcare is a human right, right? This is a positive right. Hitler is another great example, right? He created the largest per capita labor union that ever existed in human history. That'd be one type of right that he did, because you're arguing that positive rights are good. So, forcing capitalists to have a state-run, union that, answers to the will of the state would be another form of a right here. Now, is that the right, or is that the wrong right? Or is it that that's just a right because Hitler said so? Actually answer the problem here.
All right, yeah. So Nonfon, here's what's gonna happen. I'm gonna let you answer because I said I was gonna do this, and I let it go a little bit. I'm gonna let you answer it, and then as soon as you're done, I'm gonna define right. All right. So y'all go ahead. You go ahead, Nonfon, go.
Okay. What are you saying Hitler did exactly? I don't think this necessarily constitutes a right. You're saying he allowed people to join a union?
Positive rights, right?
Yeah, right. I think positive rights can be good.
You believe in
yes.
positive rights.
They can be good.
So you believe. You believe that bodily autonomy and private property and all these things can be sacrificed, and that people can be forced to pay money, forced to give up their property in order so that others can benefit.
Well,
and
but
so
now you're jamming in your theory of entitlement, which is that people are like entitled to what they produce and they're entitled to their own body. You're jamming in like all these other entitlement theory things into your theory of
if you listen to my opening statement, right, I claimed that it was a contradiction, and I said the reason is a contradiction is because you would have to get rid of all of these negative rights. In order to claim positive rights are true, you have to get rid of those negative rights. You cannot simultaneously say, I have a right to my private property, and I have a right to set my wages and labor at whatever fucking price I voluntarily choose, and at the same time say the government has a right to take some of your private property and to control what those wages are so that other people can have health care. Those two things. But
do you see how the disagreement here is over the theory of entitlement? Because you believe people are entitled to all these negative rights, where under my view, people are entitled to more than just these negative rights. Stealing from someone is only stealing if you believe that they are entitled to that money.
So hold on.
They're contradictory. It can't be more. Either or.
Hold on. Here's what we're gonna do. I'm just gonna pick a definition. We're gonna use the Black's Law Dictionary because I don't know why not. I don't get to use it enough anymore. So we're gonna give y'all two definitions, and that's how we're gonna use going forward. That's how we're defining right. That way we can just move this conversation a little bit forward past this this sticky point. All right. A right that belongs, and we're going to do absolute right, a right that belongs to every human being, such as a right, a person's liberty, a natural right. 2, an unqualified right, specifically a right that cannot be denied or curtailed under specific conditions. All right, that's what we're going to go with. Have at it.
There's two definitions. The first one is natural law, which is my definition, and the second one is one that states that a right. Well, there's two definitions there, and the second one is his, and the first one is mine.
Yeah, basically.
Right.
I don't have a big problem with the second definition. Yeah, like it's something that cannot be denied to people. Like as of now, healthcare is to some extent denied by people because it's run in a private market. Under my system, it wouldn't be really denied to people. Is that
universalizable that you cannot deny healthcare?
I mean, I would think so. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say I have an experimental procedure that costs $10 billion, right? And it's for a disease that 100 million people have, right? Does that mean the United States government can steal and seize all property in the United States, right? Seize all of the wealth of all of the millionaires and billionaires and everything. Stop making roads, stop funding public schools, stop everything that the government does in order to ensure that no one is denied that $10 billion experimental procedure.
Okay, when he said universalizable, my interpretation was like, can the government actually ensure everyone can get healthcare? I think they can, for the most part, at least.
Right, but healthcare is a vague term, right? What you're actually talking about is the universal. I mean, it's a vague term, but you're actually talking about is the moral statement universalizable? I don't think like the moral statement you have to provide healthcare or whatever is universalizable. I think a more limited statement like
you should maximize
Well, you don't think it's a
utility
right.
is well, I think it follows
Right, so
from the
you
more
don't- you
limited
obviously don't believe it's a
universalizable
right
statement
if you
that
don't think
we
it's
should maximize
universalizable.
utility. Also, again, when you say all this stuff about stealing, you're jamming into your definition of stealing your theory of entitlement. You don't believe that the government is entitled to things that people make because you believe what people make or people should own what they produce. That's the theory of entitlement. That's not
Yes.
a theory. That's not a theory. But you recognize that is a theory of
It's
entitlement.
my theory of rights. Yes. It's a negative right. Yes.
Which you believe comes from your theory of entitlement. I have a different theory of entitlement. I believe we should entitle people to things that are welfare maximizing. You believe that people are entitled to, what they produce, and the actual
Right,
disagreement here is
your
over the theory of
argument-
entitlement. You can't just jam in to your definition of stealing your theory of entitlement.
I mean, I'm not jamming in anything, right? I'm
You
not
absolutely
sneaking
are.
in that I'm a libertarian and that I believe and support negative rights. Okay, like I'm not jamming in the existence of negative rights. Negative rights aren't contradictory. Positive rights are. That's
You are
like,
because
it's
because
quite
what you're
simple.
doing when you say this is your negative rights apply because you believe people are entitled to what they produce. That comes from your theory of entitlement. That's
They're entitled to
that's
their
not
body. Yes, people have bodily autonomy.
But you also believe people are entitled to their money, and taxation is theft, right? Because you believe people are entitled
Yes,
to what they
of course.
produce. Yeah, so you see how that's a theory of
Absolutely.
entitlement thing. I have a different theory of entitlement. When
it's
you
not a
like
theory of
what you're doing
entitlement,
by
it's-
saying like
it's-
all
it's
this
a
stuff
right.
is stealing, you're
Rename
jamming
it
into
that.
your definition of stealing, just acting in a way that's inconsistent with your libertarian theory of entitlement. Under my theory of entitlement, acting in ways inconsistent with that are also stealing, but the actual disagreement here is over the theory of entitlement. You can't just keep jamming in. You can't just keep jamming
Well,
this
no,
in. Like
the problem,
Let me ask
the
you
problem
something.
here is that you're claiming a right exists. Okay, and so you can't just say a right is an arbitrary thing that we believe in the future we can predict will lead to better outcomes. Right? Like by that metric, you could say that you have a right to ban pornography. Right? You have a right. We have a right to remove pornography from existence. Okay. Well, what does that mean? Right? It's like, well, you must by definition then say that people don't have a right to produce and view pornography. That is taking away. That is imposing with violence their ability to engage in something. Right? That
it's
you're
only
saying
violence
that negative
insofar
right doesn't exist.
as you believe. It's only violence insofar as you believe that they are entitled to do, X thing. In the case of
It's quite no. Hold, pause. I will give you all day long that I, in my opening statement, in my entire life, well, in my streaming life, and in the last few years, certainly, right, believe in negative rights and believe in the non-aggression principle. But you cannot say that it is non-violent to use guns to stop people from behaving in ways that they want, or to use guns to forcibly take their property. You can't say
I didn't
that's
make any claim about
nonviolent.
violence.
Like,
I didn't make any claim about violence. I'm making a claim about it being an initiation of force. It's only an initiation of force insofar as it's inconsistent with what you believe people are
no, it's
entitled to.
definitionally an initiation in force.
Only because you definitionally believe that people are entitled to what they produce. If you believe like me, that
I believe
people
in
are,
words.
Yeah,
I believe
great.
in words
It-
that if you take guns and you say, I'm going to take your money because it's actually our money because we say so, that is absolutely force. Like, don't be silly.
Let me ask
Well,
you.
just
okay,
think
wait.
force is
Can I ask this?
justified.
Can I ask this? I know you've heard this example before. Let's say you're on the the ninth floor of an apartment building that you were, legally allowed to go to. You fall out out of a window and you grab on to that person's flagpole, right? And you're like climbing your way down the flagpole, and somebody says, "Hey, wait, I did not give you permission to use my flagpole. Should you let go of that flagpole?"
So,
Wait,
The
would it be an
flagpole
initiation of
analogy-
force? Is that an initiation of force? Is the real question there?
it would absolutely be an initiation of force under natural law, absent any common law existing, which obviously would. Right, so the flagpole analogy in libertarian philosophy is very interesting, and the reason it's very interesting, and I'm glad that you've been learning a little bit about libertarianism and the arguments we use. It'll make you a better person once you finally accept that I'm right. Is that the reason that it's so interesting is because natural law philosophy does not deal with contracts and does not deal with common law. So absent any contract, absent any common law, absent any superficial additive voluntary systems that say that if you're in an apartment building, that debris that falls down, these are the rules in which we live by. Yes, absent any form of lease or contracts or all of those things, it would be a form of aggression to then intentionally move onto someone else's property without their permission, even if you accidentally ended up there. But again, that's absent those prior voluntary agreements.
But that relies on your
Something
theory of
that
hold
someone
on,
has
hold on, Nonfon. I'm gonna let you go respond to that here just one second. But all right, you can respond to that, and then here's the next question I want y'all to like kind of focus on here, like moving from the theoretical to the practical, right? Because right now it seems to me y'all are arguing on what is the right, whatever. Okay, so we clearly y'all have different opinions on which is better, right? So here's what I want to know: what's the superior? Sell me on it. Sell me on why healthcare should be a universal right versus should it be the greater good? Does it matter if it's the greater good? Should the individual be all best? Like all these kinds of things. However, just sell this to me after that. But go ahead and respond to him, and then let's move on to that Nonfon.
I gave a bunch in my opening statement, so I feel like it's fair to let Nonfon start this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, he also needs to respond to your last thing. So go ahead. So you respond to that, and start us off with that as much as you want.
I mean, the easy response is just that it's only a violation of rights because he reads into it his preferred system of entitlement. His preferred system that the person who uses the land for productive purposes owns the land. If you have a different view of entitlement, like my view, that people are entitled to things that, maximize utility, then we're fighting over theories of entitlement. You bring up
libertarian thought experiments as a meme and not understanding the full context, because I was absolutely crushing you in the before, so you had to subvert the conversation. But it's fine. Your savior has swooped in to save you. Gibbs wants us to move into an internal critique of your consequential analysis, right? Because I've already won the first portion of the debate. So go ahead and give the reasons why universal healthcare is better.
Nonfon, you can also respond to that too, but I'll respond to that. Yeah, and then we go to the theoretical to practical. Go ahead.
I mean, I'll talk about the the morality behind it all day. I don't know what you mean. I mean, if someone just has not read anything about libertarian philosophy, or has only read your version of libertarian philosophy, maybe they think you're winning. I think for anyone of half a brain, they see the insane reductios that your system of property would lead to. But I mean, we can switch to the practical if we want to, I guess. But
yeah, go ahead.
I mean,
perfect.
You go ahead and go, right? Like I said, I gave a bunch in my opening statement.
I mean, it's easy to understand why for certain industries the market could fail. It could lead to worse outcomes than if the government intervenes in the market in some way. So with healthcare, we have the issue of inelastic demand, right? Like there are certain things that you have to get essentially no matter what. Insulin has very inelastic demand. A heart surgery is going to have essentially perfectly inelastic demand in an emergency. If you don't do it, you will literally die. The government can impose price ceilings on stuff with perfectly inelastic demand and doesn't have huge negative outcomes. There are also issues with positive externalities. If healthcare is too expensive, people don't go get preventative care. They stay sick more often. They don't show up to work. They are less productive. And there's information asymmetry. There's adverse selection issues. There are all these issues why healthcare could be better solved by a public option with some limited competition than a strict free market system.
So your evidence is I don't want to straw man you. I want to steel man you to the best of my ability, right? Which is that your philosophical position is we'll say maybe rule utilitarianism, if I had to guess, right, based off this conversation.
Yeah, I would say broadly rule utilitarianism. Yeah.
All right. So presumptively, you're looking for material outcomes as well as presumed happiness metric, right? Potentially things like opportunity, right? So I brought these up in my opening, right? I said that it was very close, if not perfectly inelastic, and I said you're not going to search Google reviews for the best cheapest surgeon in town when you're getting your heart shot with a bullet to remove the bullet, right? You need that done immediately. I don't disagree with that, but that doesn't actually make the argument that government or treating it as a right has any improvement. Your entire response thus far is just a claim that I've already dealt with in my opening statement. So I guess I'll let you go again because you didn't give anything beyond a claim, of which I already gave reason, logic, and evidence is false even in my own opening statement. So do you have evidence that that it will lead towards better outcomes, that it will lead towards a happier, healthier society. As arbitrary as that is, and for the audience, I am doing an internal critique here. Do you have that?
I didn't bring anything up because I thought you would object to the market failure stuff, as libertarians like to do. But like, you could see how like the government
you didn't
could
actually
solve.
say market failure so much.
I did. I'm pretty sure I said market failure, but I mean, we have like you could see how the government could solve like the adverse selection issue if they just mandate everyone get health insurance, right, or automatically enroll everyone onto a specific public option plan.
Well, okay, so your first, so we'll deal with this bit by bit, right? So the government could solve the problem by the adverse selection by forcing everyone to be on health insurance. Now, who would pay for said health insurance?
People via premiums, but also again, when you say force, you're reading into it the definition, your theory of entitlement. So I obviously object to that. But.
Okay, I'm not reading in my fucking definition of force, you autistic weirdo. When you say we're going to make a law that says you must do this, and then if you disobey that, there will be punishments, and me saying, yeah, they're going to force people to do it. I'm not utilizing force.
Right, but you think it's an initiation of force.
A colloquial definition. No, you're trying to run away from the question back into trying to make libertarianism appear as a meme because it's not a well-known philosophy to the audience. Fuck that. Answer the question and just think of force as colloquial, which is that it is against the law and that people with guns are going to either take shit from you or they're going to fucking put a gun to your head and put you in a cage if you don't follow said rule. And the rule is everyone must have health insurance. Now, who's going to pay for that? Health insurance.
People via, I mean, it depends on the exact option. I think a single payer system would probably still be a net benefit, but I'm more in support of a public option in which people would pay premiums.
Did you like? Hold on. Let me just do this real quick.
Yeah,
Did you define a net benefit? Like, what do you mean by like what is a net benefit?
Leads to overall good outcomes relative to the counterfactual.
Okay.
Right. So right, but the problem is that that's arbitrary. Like, what is good outcomes?
Well, I mean, good outcomes is going to be.
Like, it's going to be like.
I mean, it's going to be somewhat axiomatic. So some people might, define goodness in a different axiomatic way. But I would say generally the well-being of sentient creatures.
Okay. If I rape you, hold on, pause. If I rape you, right? If I bend you over, I'm 6'5". I've done some martial arts. I've been in the army. I've been through quite a few scruffles and scraps. I've been homeless. I've had to do quite a few things. I'm pretty sure I could rape you if I could get hard, right?
Probably.
If I rape you, right now, let's say I rape you and I'm really good at getting away with it, right? I can hide evidence like a motherfucker. And then I and I'm also really good at psychological torture, right? Like Ramsay Bolton from like Game of Thrones, right? I'm going to torture you until you become Reek, until you believe absolutely that you enjoyed it and that you're my servant. So now you are a servant and you've been psychologically tortured and abused and raped for years on end, but you say that you love me and that you'll do everything for me. I'm super fucking happy, right? Whose happiness is worth more, and by what metric? At the end of it, right? You're absolutely happy now. You're Reek, okay? You're no longer Nonfon. You're Reek from Game of Thrones, and you're now happy, and I'm super happy, right? So wouldn't that be maximizing the well-being of humans in this regard, or would it not be, right?
It depends. In a vacuum, if you're just basically presupposing that everyone wins, then like, yeah, sure, I'll bite the bullet to be a net benefit or whatever. However, I'm a
serial rapist and torturer, and I've done this a bunch of times, and it always works out, and they're always happy.
Well, but now if we're adding in like the real world to it, I've already said in my opening, the reason I entail negative rights to people is because I believe generally negative rights are a net benefit to society. It doesn't automatically mean you can never violate a negative right and have it be a net benefit. It just means, in general, I think establishing these negative rights leads to good outcomes over time.
How can it be a right if you say that it is morally good to violate it? By what world
potentially
is something a right if it is also morally good to violate the right? Do you understand how this is silly?
Well, no, I think it can be utility maximizing to break a right. So, like, obviously, I could do the steal the penny to save the world, or steal the penny to to, or even the flagpole example that's violating a right.
That's not a limit. That's not a limit case. The Ramsey Bolton one is obviously a limit case, right? But the concept that you believe that it can be morally justified to violate a right means that you don't believe in it as a right. You just
Fabian, we're not saying we don't mean the same thing when we say morally justified, because when you say morally justified, you're making an is statement. It is morally justified to do this because non-aggression principle. I'm making an ought statement.
You made the fucking statement that you could violate those rights and that it could potentially be good.
Yes, because again, we mean different things by morally justifiable. When I say morally justifiable, I'm talking about maximizing utility. When you say morally justifiable, you mean it's a descriptive statement, not an ought statement. It's not a normative statement. It's a descriptive statement.
I mean that it has to be universalizable, so you can't call something a fucking right and then say that it is morally good to violate said right. It means that it's not a fucking right. You don't believe in rights. That's fine. Again, we can get away from the discussion of rights. The problem here is that your only piece of evidence that your consequential analysis of a single payer option or that socialized healthcare thus far in the debate that you have put forward is that socialized medicine can use the power of the state to force everybody to be in the healthcare system. You haven't explained why that's good or why we ought to do that.
It fixes adverse selection, but also...
I'm going to let you go in one second. It's actually a perfect segue into like what I want, right? So I'm just going to summarize what I think I'm getting, and then one of y'all can correct me. I'm summarizing, right? Like, and this is kind of where I want this conversation to go. So y'all, I see Fabian's argued over like, okay, I'm not going to go through y'all's definitions because, dear Lord, we've been through that a couple of times, right? So,
of course,
my argument is, and this is my question or argument or whatever, is, let me see how to put this. So you basically have Fabian's idea of like, okay, people aren't entitled to people's work, and you have your idea of like a collective good, depending on, I guess, circumstantial, like like real world circumstances. I mean, you can correct me, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm oversimplifying. I'm sure I am. But that being said, okay,
tell me on like oversimplify it.
Yeah. Thank God. I'm real good at that. Real simple man. So that being said, why should we pick one of these over the other? Like, is there gonna be like y'all could use like maybe a real world example, like, oh, everybody, I'm just gonna make some shit up. If I'm right, then hey, everybody's better. Life is better in Sweden because they got healthcare, and why that's comparable to how the U.S. is a bigger, or why even if that is true, it shouldn't matter because they're like holding us at gunpoint. If your aggressive view versus hey, that's not what's happening because of mine. So there you go. Keep that in mind. Let's go from there. How's that? Let's see which one's better, and tell me why. Tell me.
Like I said, I gave a bunch. I gave a bunch in my opening.
Sure. Well, we'll come back. No, fine. Go ahead. Sell us on.
Tell you why my moral system is better.
2 minutes or so each on this. Yeah. Why do you think your idea is better than?
I mean,
and
a
why
large part
should trump the other. And then after that, in about 5 minutes or so, 6 minutes, we're gonna go to judges' questions. So you go ahead and start us off there.
In large part, it's just axiomatic. I mean, I don't think that's a huge issue for my philosophy. A lot of them are a result of like more fundamental axioms. I just want to make it very clear for the audience, when Fabian says morally justifiable, he's not making an ought statement. His system cannot tell you ought statements. He's making an is statement. I don't really care if when Fabian says morally unjustifiable, he's making an is statement. What I want my moral system to do is inform me what I ought to do. Fabian's moral system cannot do that. My moral system can.
Okay, I'll respond.
It is ought time. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. And for once, it wasn't me that brought up the is-ought problem.
I know.
It was Nonfon. Yeah. So again, libertarianism is a theory of natural law, and yes, you're correct that it doesn't give moral ought statements, but that doesn't mean that I don't have any beliefs that are moral oughts. That doesn't mean that I don't have objectivist philosophy and other things. And that is also why I said, right. Right. Sure. You get in your jabs. It's fine. At least you're here for something. So again, in my opening statement, I gave several reasons. Number one is that, even under the Frankenstein social mixed market, economy, healthcare system that we have in the United States, it's cheaper. It's absolutely cheaper than it is in other countries. Other countries are going bankrupt trying to pay things. The NHS is a great example of that. Now, that might be potentially because of immigration and things of that nature that they hadn't accounted for. Obviously, like that's going to have a large, impact on cost. But nevertheless, it is cheaper. I gave the reason why when you look at many of these studies, they claim that it's not cheaper, and why that data is false. And looking at things like bankruptcy, looking at things like the Black Book, looking at, like you can just test this out.
Well, wait,
in your
no,
own
you
life.
don't care
Go to
about
a
any of that.
hospital.
You care about a priori synthetic statements, okay? Do we not see how if more
Well, no,
people
you
were
are
on
the
one
one-
health insurance plan, that would lead to a reduction in cost because the insurer can negotiate prices down from providers? Why should I care about any of this empirical evidence? You don't care about it.
Again, it's an internal critique. And as I said, when I went into the internal critique in my opening statement, of which you still haven't given any evidence to support your claims,
Right.
I said the devil is in the details, so let's give the devil his due. So again, I went into the price metric. Again, I showcase how when we compare deaths combining, dying on a waiting list as well as dying from lack of access to healthcare, that even if we do everything we can to give you the most charitable case, a system like the NHS produces 9 times the amount of people dying, both combining lack of access to healthcare, which of course they don't technically have because everyone is under their under their system, as well as people that die on waiting lists. And that obviously that this shows an outcome where socialized medicine is way more likely to kill you. One of the things that I didn't get into, which I think is really important to discussing the differences, is between 1992 and 2004 the NCBI did a study on medical innovation, specifically talking about drug research. And they found during that period that 43.7% of all novel drugs made in the world were developed and made in America. And recent surveys, one from the RAND Corporation, shows that we have access to about 74% of all medication, which is higher than almost every other country in the world. And then even more research and data shows that it's somewhere between 50 to 70% of all novel prescriptions and drugs are created in the United States, because that profit motive and because of that system of capitalism where healthcare isn't treated like a human right drives that innovation and drives so many things. So it saves countless millions of lives because of that profit model. And furthermore, now the number could be lower than 70% if you account for one variable. It could be closer to 40%. I'm almost finished, right? Which is that many things start development in Germany and then American corporations have to purchase them. And the reason is because the regulations and the socialism is so bad in Germany that they can't actually bring drugs to market. So they'll do the research and the development and then they'll bring them over to America, where we're less regulated, we're less socialist, and we treat healthcare as a human right to a much less degree. And that allows them to bring those drugs to market. But nevertheless, a majority of all novel drugs are in the entire world are made in the United States because of that profit motive and because of those systems, even in the kind of mixed market system we have.
Yeah, well, I think,
All right,
I mean,
perfect.
there's a lot of other
One
things you
second.
said, but I think you obviously, I need to get just one thing.
Sure,
one thing,
right,
Gibbs.
sure.
Fabian, like,
I'm gonna
obviously
ask you a
engaged
question.
in, like, some type of contradiction there. He's saying, like, simultaneously, hey, look at it, if we reduce cost, we're going to lose a lot of medical innovation, which to some extent I agree with. I do think that going on a public option would reduce medical innovation by a small percentage. I didn't bring studies on how much, but he's also saying somehow it's not cheaper. If it's not cheaper, then how are we reducing
I
innovation?
never made that claim. I made the exact
You
opposite
did.
claim.
You
which is
said
that
you
it
said
is
it's not cheaper. Other countries are going bankrupt because of it.
So,
Yes,
all right.
other countries are going bankrupt because of the healthcare costs that are associated with socialism and with treating healthcare as a human right. It's cheaper in America. Health insurance and healthcare costs are lower in America if you actually understand how to break down the
So-
data, as opposed
Right.
to just using Black Book because they equivocate price and cost.
All right, so I got to jump in here. We're gonna move on. I'm gonna ask a question from Fabian's audience to Nonfon here, and then after you answer this,
I must have
Nonfon.
missed it.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm trying to watch all the chats. It's a little hard to keep track of everybody and to do the moderating.
Hell
and-
yeah, brother.
But we're getting there. So this one, they wanted the Nonfon. So you're gonna answer this Nonfon, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Liberal Cluck to start us off if he's ready to ask a couple of questions here. So let's go with the question is, Nonfon, do women have rights to their own bodies as society suffers from below replacement fertility and must reproduce? Do you seize the means of reproduction? I guess they wrote a series called The Giver on this. I don't know if y'all remember that book series, but it's a good book series. Anyway,
I mean,
go ahead.
Generally, I believe in tailing negative rights to a woman, it leads to positive outcomes. I'm sure we could imagine a hypothetical where, taking away those rights from a woman leads to a net benefit. But I don't think under any set of real world assumptions, you're going to get that outcome. Interestingly, though, I think there's a big problem for Fabian when it comes to conjoined twins, given that, I don't know his specific breed of libertarianism, but, libertarians make claims all the time that, rights can't conflict, but, if we have a set of conjoined twins that were made at exactly the same time, they started using all their organs at the same exact time, then who has the right to their shared reproductive organ? If it's neither of them, then they can't be raped. They have no ownership over that organ. A lot of libertarians hate the idea of shared ownership. They don't think it can even exist.
I'll let Scott answer that, and then Cluck, go ahead.
It's a very interesting one. I might get back to you on it, right? Like, because the concept of the right to bodily autonomy is derived from an individual body, right? So what you were talking about is bodily autonomy for a shared body. I would have to, it is an interesting conundrum. I'd have to look into it in more degree. I don't want to give like a full answer now. I like the question. It's the first thing you've asked that's actually good. But,
yeah, so interestingly, under my system, it's very easy for me. I can say it's probably a net benefit not to fucking rape a conjoined twin. Under your system, this is somehow a hard question.
No, it's not a hard question to rape the conjoined twin.
You don't have an
right,
answer.
But it does become a conundrum, right? If they share the same liver, right? Well, it becomes a conundrum if, let's say, they share the same liver, and let's say one of them is, comes down with some type of sickness and the other one would survive so long as there was a surgery that killed the other one, right? So that the one becomes a, parasitic to the other one's life or something, right? The right to bodily autonomy doesn't cease simply because, the body has two heads.
Well, do you believe that there can be shared ownership between his organs? Isn't that a violation of some type of bodily autonomy?
Again,
quick answer, then I'm going to go to Cluck here.
Yeah, again, I would say that it would depend upon the circumstances in how libertarian natural law philosophy would handle it, right? In your example of rape, where you thought it was a gotcha, it's obviously not, right? But there might be certain medical situations, right, where one party consents and the other party doesn't, where we have to figure out a first user principle and who is actually the owner of said thing, and I gave a counter example, right, just off of the top of my head. Where one is dying and the other can be saved by it, the one becomes parasitic. But again, it would be interesting to detail in, but again, it doesn't stump me on the concept of rape, such as yours.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So let's go ahead. Cluck, questions. You got a couple questions here.
I am so glad rape and Hitler did not come up in our debate.
Oh, well. We have high standards here at the Gibbs channel.
Hold on, pause. That's not true at all, Liberal Cluck, because I'm listening to you, and I just know that you think that Trump literally is Hitler. So of course Hitler came up in your debate.
Yeah.
It's a smart choice coming at the judges. I like the strategy. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see how it plays off.
I'm teasing.
So I guess my first question is going to be to Nonfon. Fabian, what's going on about how medical, oh goodness gracious, why can't I think of the word? Development happens more often in America because one of the things was that they're able to make a profit here. Do you believe that your system of medical care will necessitates the banning of profits in the medical industry?
That's to me?
Yes.
No.
Your public option, will that strip companies of being able to make profits in your mind?
No, I don't think it'll strip them of being able to make profits. I think it'll certainly, if you're going to reduce costs, you're going to reduce either quality or research and development. I accept that there are trade-offs to these things. I don't think you have to completely abolish profit or anything. And also, if we're going to save money, well, maybe we just take some of the money we save and invest it in R&D. Just have the government give out grants, which they already do for some things, to more medical, more medicine research. But also,
where does the
Can I interject just one quick real quick?
if the host
When
allows
you
it.
say
Yeah.
you said certainly if you reduce costs, you're going to either reduce quality or something else. That's patently not true within economics, right? One of the best ways to increase profit is to reduce cost, right?
Or sorry,
And that's how
reduce
you increase
price
your
is-
rate of profit.
we're reducing cost, as in reducing cost that people pay, which is because you reduce the price that people can that the producers can receive for that good. That's what I meant. Reduce cost for
if you
people,
mean
but
overall
reduce the
cost
price for
to the entire U.S. Sure.
In your mind, where does the reduction in cost come from?
It comes from the ability of the public option or single payer to more effectively negotiate with all the providers. I also will add, I do, like I was talking to Econoboi yesterday. Econoboi is a big single payer guy. I'm not as big a single payer because I believe, we should allow people to buy private insurance that covers, medication that is new and expensive and that a public option doesn't necessarily want to cover. It's too expensive. So there is still some incentive for innovation there from private insurers.
Quick question to Nonfon, following up on that. So you believe that a public option would be better at negotiating prices than insurance companies, but what evidence do you have of this, considering that Medicare is uniquely bad at negotiating drug costs, especially when compared to insurance companies, when the private market that is already heavily regulated is better at negotiating those costs? Why do you think more things like Medicare that negotiate drug prices and healthcare costs would be better at it than insurance companies based off of the profit model? Where are you getting that?
Medicare was unable to negotiate costs for a while until my man Biden made them able to do it. So I'd have to know when that data was from. But also, I know this.
That's not true at all.
I know this a priori synthetically. If you increase the amount of people in an insurance company, they're going to have more negotiating leverage.
That is like Bill Clinton was famous for negotiating costs. There have been several presidents and several administrations that on behalf of Medicare have put in bills and different things. Now, yes, you are correct that Medicare as a whole negotiating those prices
Can I ask Fabian
is
my
something that is
question?
relatively new.
Yeah, you got this is your last one, Liberal Cluck, and then we're gonna go to the Lactoid. Go ahead.
Oh gosh. All right. Fabian, do you believe that rights are absolute?
Yeah, I think they have to be absolute, or otherwise they're not a right. Okay. I think if you say something is a right and then you say that you can violate said right, then it's not a right definitionally. It's something else, right? It's some form of as Nonfon likes to call it, some form of entitlement, but you're obviously not entitled to it if there are times in which you're not entitled to it, right? Even the human rights,
you agree
Human Rights Declaration
that the
says
rights
that it has
cannot
to be
give you
something that
ought
it can
statements.
never be violated.
You agree the rights cannot give you ought statements, right? You agree that your rights don't give you ought statements.
Well, they give you, I would say that rights give you an argumentation about what is no longer logically justifiable in terms of saying your system is ethical if it violates said rights, right? So might makes reality, but it doesn't make right. And so, if I have the guns, I can go and violate rights as much as I want. But yeah, I would say that rights don't give you ought statements. You can kind of derive at an ought not statement from that. But again, libertarian, theory and natural law philosophy doesn't engage in what you ought to do. That's a separate concern.
Yeah, I mean, so long as your system doesn't give you ought statements, I prefer my system, which is actually capable of telling me what I ought do and ought not do. Obviously,
shut the fuck up. You don't understand libertarianism if you keep saying this, even though I'm explaining it to you, right? Libertarianism doesn't say what's the best apple to eat, but that doesn't mean that you can't that your moral system is superior if your moral system claims that Red Delicious are better than Granny Smith. It's not making those claims. That's not my full fucking philosophy.
So let's go to Lactoid here. Let you get a couple questions there, and then we'll let them both go.
Thank you. I have a series of questions for each of the debaters, and I will not accept either debater jumping in into the answer of the other debater.
All right.
So,
that's what the judge is saying. This is one more, by perfect segue, real quick. This is the perfect reason why Gibbs is the best here, because the judges get to decide what's best for them. So if you cross the judges, that's on you. All right, go ahead.
My first series of questions is to Scott. I have this written down. How is this not a semantics debate? Couldn't Nonfon simply define a right as whatever his ideal society categorizes as a service that maximizes overall utility to some degree? If he can't do this, where is the intrinsic and objective source that a right comes from? Is there any level of utility that can override a intrinsic right?
The NAP.
Yeah, so you're correct in that it is a semantics debate, right? About what the word right means, because the prompt is healthcare a human right? And so it's important to know what the definition of
human
the
action.
right is in order for us to be able to make the claim positively or negatively that healthcare is or isn't a human right. If the question is, should we as a society have universal healthcare, right? Then we wouldn't be having a semantic debate around the word right, because that's the prompt. He can claim a new definition of right and say that that rights can be violated, under different circumstances, et cetera, from his framework. And, and that's fine for him to say. I think he's wrong. And, he would obviously think he's right if he was making said argument. But again, that's kind of the point of the debate, is that it does center around that word and what that word means. And I think that word holds a lot of power to the American people, right? I think it's important when people talk about their rights or their constitutional rights, or the Enlightenment philosophy, that you don't hijack those words to mean government power can be used so long as it accepts our fee-fees, but you actually mean it for what it's meant to mean, if you're going to argue for political change in the world. And I do think it's an important one as well.
All right, Nonfon, if a service maximizes overall utility, is this the absolute definer of your definition of right? If so, if slavery in the southern United States generated sufficient profits, would owning slaves then become a right? If not, and you have some sort of threshold, what factors play into drawing your line, and why doesn't this apply to healthcare?
I mean, yeah, it's always going to be about utility. If we just presuppose that slavery maximized utility, then I would support slavery. Now it happens to be the case that I believe granting people negative rights, the ability, like self-ownership, grants sufficient utility in the long run to justify entailing them to people. But if we just presuppose that it didn't, then yeah, I'll support slavery. I'll bite the bullet, whatever.
Okay, thank you.
That's not a series of questions. That's just two.
Well, no, but it was a series of
more
questions for each of you. I mean,
you got about
can I
you got about a minute and a half. I'll give you.
Let me dig into a little bit more, because Nonfon answered it very directly, actually, a little bit surprisingly directly, I think. But Scott, where is the sort of intrinsic and objective? Because you said in your answer, we can't get away from defining a right from what a right is. What is the objective source of the definition of right? Where does this come from?
Okay, so I mean, again, it's the objective source for the definition of a word is never going to be a thing, right? I mean, language changes. People use words because they have utility in conveying concepts and ideas, right? Now, when the concept or idea changes and the word stays the same, I think it can be, for lack of a better term, problematic within discourse, right? So I would say that John Locke, right, is defining rights a certain way, that the founding fathers are defining rights a certain way. All of these things that are the corpus of what we feel a right is in our society, and what the political philosophy that set up our current government that we live under, right? That's how right is used. And so if you start using that word differently, then both the philosophy and the doctrine and the opinions of the people that set up our current government, I think that becomes really problematic. I mean, you as a lawyer would recognize that, if you just start changing a word and now you can reinterpret a word out of its historical context within law, that can be a real problem for establishing common law and things of that nature. And that, it is important to recognize what that word meant originally, even if we start to use it differently today. And so I do fight to gatekeep those words, at least from an Enlightenment perspective. Rights probably meant different things, and certainly did under, let's say, monarchies, right? I mean, rights were, the rights had a, I'm trying to think of a good example. I can't think of one off the top of my head. But there are texts of governance, right, before liberal democracies where right had and conveyed a different meaning, right? But I don't think that that necessarily is a relevant definition to our current legal system and social context.
I'll let Nonfon respond here, and then we'll move to closings here, I think.
Yeah, I thought you thought rights were logically deducible from human action.
I do.
Okay, then that would have been a much easier answer than what you just said. But okay.
Well, no, that's just substantiating the rights,
Right.
and the follow up to that is a very long conversation,
Which we don't have time for right this second.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else Nonfon you want to say there? Is that all you
Nope,
want to
I'm
say?
good.
Okay.
You can go to.
All right, fantastic. Let's move to closings. Let's get y'all. I'll give y'all 3. I think we gave y'all 3 for each in the first one, so we'll do 3 for each. Now, give me 1 second. Who started this? I think Fabian did. So, Nonfon, you're going to start us off here on the closing. Give me 1 split second. And all right, you can start when you want. I'll give you 1 minute, and then this will be 30 seconds. All right, go ahead.
I think obviously Fabian makes a number of mistakes when he says morally justifiable. He's not talking about any oughts. He's making a descriptive statement that can't inform what we ought do. I don't see rights as meaningful if they don't inform what we ought do. Under my system, the moral framework does actually inform what we ought do, and we ought entail some rights to people like equitable access to healthcare because it maximizes positive outcomes. We didn't talk about it too much, but there's a number of reasons the healthcare market fails. For example, adverse selection. This is when like people who need health insurance most buy health insurance, and they, it can create a death spiral because companies have too risky patients and they have to raise premiums, so the least risky people leave, and this just keeps happening until the healthcare company goes bankrupt. The government can stop that by intervening and mandating that everyone buy health insurance, or by enrolling everyone into a public option. So there's that, and I guess again, every time he says like the government's forcing or initiating force, he's reading into the initiating force his theory of libertarian entitlement. He's saying that people are entitled to the things that they produce, and therefore if the government tries to take that from you, that is an initiation of force. Under my view, we are entitled to things to rights that maximize positive outcomes. So in my view, it's not an initiation of force to take someone's money. It's defensive force because other people are to some degree entitled to the money to maximize welfare. I think it's telling that his philosophy cannot make ought statements and thinks it's a hard question about whether or not a person's rights are being violated when you rape a conjoined twin. I'm done.
Thank you so much. Very short and to the point on many of these answers. Interesting. All right, go ahead, Fabian. You got 3 minutes.
Yeah. Before I start, I'd just like to clarify, right, that just because I'm a libertarian doesn't mean that that is the entire corpus of my philosophy. Nonfon is simply lying in his closing statement. He's lying about the fact that, I thought that there was some questions about raping a conjoined twin. I never made that statement. I only said that there was, there would be issues in terms of like liver and who gets to keep the liver, under circumstances where one person may have to die because of specific diseases. And again, I think it's weird to bring up that, morally questionable situations because he was unable to really articulate, what it was that Hitler did wrong when he killed 6 million Jews. He says, oh, well, it's obviously the rights that he gave didn't maximize utility. And the biggest problem with that is that the recognition that there is an action that the state could have taken that would have maximized utility is an understanding that there is an objective truth, right? That, as logic, A equals A, statements must be true or false. So when you recognize that the state can get wrong what rights do and don't or shouldn't exist, or which ones maximize utility, even under his own framework, if we agree that he is a logical person and that he believes in formal logic, that A equals A and that, statements must either be true or false, then he recognizes that there is an objective system, an objective rule set that will indeed maximize utility. And so, value is subjective. It can be difficult to determine what those things are, but it is true and it is out there, which leads us to believe via convergence theory that those rights do exist. Now, a right that is conditional is a contradiction in and of itself. To say that something is an inalienable right that cannot be right, like even when we look at the UN Declaration of Rights, and by the way, the UN Declaration of Rights is contradictory in and of itself because they do think of things like access to healthcare, access to education, and things like that as rights. But even they admit that the right is inalienable. Right? Their own definitions that they use are the things that they contradict later. And so, I'm seeing a similar vein from Nonfon in the way that he is trying to argue that contradictions, exist in reality, when really what you need to do is you need to check your premises, because you'll find that one of those is false. From the internal critique perspective, very quickly, I gave a ton of things. He brought basically no data to bear. He had no evidence to support his consequentialism, which is weird because consequentialists usually focus on empiricism, but he brought no empirical data. I did, and I showcased many ways why, socialized healthcare is a problem. The only thing that he is claiming is that apparently the ACA lowered healthcare costs. This is news to me. This is news to literally everyone in fucking America, that somehow mandating individuals get healthcare lowered healthcare costs, because we live in that America now, and it did nothing but increase the cost of healthcare. So yeah, I just don't know what the fuck he's talking about. I wish he brought some evidence to bear for his argumentation, but it looks like he just fell flat of having any support for his arguments. It's unfortunate.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. All right, judges, feel free to send me who y'all thought in PMs. Cluck, why don't you go ahead since it lead us off with the who won and why?
I think Nonfon did. Fabian, it was mostly things that. Okay, so to critique Fabian, I think that the reek analogy was really, really bad analogy. I understood what you were trying to get at. It was just it didn't work because in your analogy, the person actually isn't happy. And you'd have to give that the person that's being raped is happy in order to, and that's just not how those things work. So I thought that was a poor analogy. You're also kind of condescending towards your opponent, which I typically don't like. And my chat, I have one chatter, and he also called you out for being insufferable. So I got to keep this chatter around as much as I can. If Nonfon, I think the weakest part of your argument is when you're trying to convince people that they're not entitled to the product of their work. I think that you need to phrase that in a different way. I understand what you're trying to get at, but it's not going to be convincing to anybody. You got to phrase it in a different way. I would say that taxes are it's not that you're not entitled to the product of your work, but you do have to pay into society or something through taxes or some shit like that. I don't know, but yeah, I think that was probably the weakest part of your argument. Yeah, so that's what I decided.
Right.
I just want to say, Fabian, I like it when you demean me. Okay, I give you permission.
All right, well,
yeah.
Can I switch my vote?
Yeah, you were mean a bunch of times too, and I enjoy it. I like it. I like a little fire.
Good. All right, Lactoid, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, so I voted for Scott. I think Scott elaborated more on the topic. He was more knowledgeable and generally went into depth into arguing for his philosophy, and also brought in some empirics. Early on, he did a little bit of a clever move by refusing to go into his libertarian philosophy when he mentioned the word intrinsic. I think that this should have been immediately attacked. This was the topic of the debate that was sort of rounding on, but he was essentially able to not go into that by saying, that kind of gets in deep into my libertarian philosophy that we don't have to go into. But when Scott says, we don't have to go into this, that should be a kind of a red flag that perhaps you might want to go into that. And so, Nonfon, you didn't capitalize on that, which I think did take away some points. Nonfon, Scott is very aggressive and is pretty well known to be a very verbose debater. And so you need to be able to wrestle control a bit more often, which I don't think that you're able to do too well in this debate. Your lack of assertiveness kind of allowed Scott to get out so much more, which gives him points because he's able to have the time to go into all of his different points. I do think, Scott, that you did cross the line of assertiveness a few times, and you insulted him and made one particular shocking hypothetical that kind of felt jarring and came across pretty poorly. And I don't think Nonfon did either to really any kind of memorable degree. So that actually, I think, gives Nonfon some points in that regard. I think that's something that helps to avoid if you want the audience to be on your side a little bit more. But overall, just, the overall theme of the debate, I think, was, Scott, you were just in control of the debate the whole time, right? You were maintaining control, and yeah, did you push the control a little bit too far a few times? Yes, but even when you reined it back, you were still in control, and I felt you really didn't lose control at all during the whole debate, and so that's why I gave you the win.
Fantastic. So we have 1-1 on that one. So yeah, Cluck said Nonfon. Lactoid says Fabian. So I know there's some controversy on the chat saying I had like thousands of votes. Mine ended and it said 27-8. So I'm gonna go with it. Says Fabian. So we're gonna go with that. I think it mimicked what the chat also the other one said. Maybe people were just voting a bunch and it just only showed me people's actual votes. I don't know. But that's what we got here. So yeah, it looks like 2-1. That was close. Last minute step in. I don't know that. I know that. I hope that. That doesn't hurt your feelings here, Nonfon, but you did really good. I do think that it was a little hard to go for one person to prepare for somebody totally different. So I don't know if that gave you an advantage or disadvantage. But I know you're ready for the one with the tuple. Any closing thoughts there, Nonfon? What do you think?
Listen, my mom told me to be nicer in debates, and it backfired on me. Okay. She watched my other debate. She said, "Stop swearing so much."
They both gave you points for that, though.
I see. They both gave you points. I chat. I guess okay. I think that honestly, you made the best point of the y'all's debate was that my thing can answer this, his thing can't. I think even if other beforehand or whatever. But I'm the only moderator, so I don't get a fucking vote. So whatever. But I thought that was a good argument. However, but I personally like the fire. So if you get a judge in here that does like the fire, whatever, but it just happens these two guys are a bunch of baby bitches. No, I'm just kidding. They don't like the they like the niceties.
I think Fabian has really good presentation when he's talking. Even if you I'm not a philosophy nerd, but I feel like he knows what he's talking about when he's talking. So I think that's one thing I can say positive about him. Also, Joe Men, my one chatter, says that he really likes this debate roundup. So props, Gibbs.
I like the format.
Oh, appreciate it. Glad y'all enjoy it.
What's up?
We're here to argue with you.
We have many criticisms.
We have many
have a
criticisms. Okay.
Oh yes, we do.
I think on second reflection, you should have lost the debate. I think you were right, of course, and I think you, if he let you talk as much, you would win, right? But I think you made multiple. I would call them by this point classical Nonfon mistakes. Okay.
Classical Nonfon. Okay.
When I talked to you about the opening statement, I was under the impression you have 1 minute. You had 7. Okay.
Okay.
He just yapped there about how single payer sucks, and then just you didn't use your opening statement to be like, by the way, all the stuff he mentioned was about waiting times, but that's actually, if you look at waiting times, they're lower in universal multi-payer, which is my system. I don't know how Fabian can even fucking say that the US has the lowest or the highest life expectancy, or very high life expectancy now when you compare it to every other country. That's a bad argument, by the way, because there are obviously other factors like diabetes and whatnot, but still, why does he get to mention it and not you? But either way, when he's wrong, right? But either way, stuff like that. You just completely wasted your opening statement. I thought that was a bad move.
Okay.
I didn't know it was 7 minutes, right? So I thought that was really bad.
Yeah.
And he gets to just lie in his opening statement. Very bad, very bad. So there's that. Second thing, you just let him interrupt too much. Right? He just interrupts you, and he interrupts you, and he interrupts you, and he's interrupting you, and in the meanwhile, he's making this impression that he's this philosopher king, when he's completely fucking retarded. He's saying things that are, every person with a grasp of philosophy knows is retarded, right? Like a contradiction. That's not a contradiction. That's not what a contradiction means. Sorry. So a bunch of stuff like that. Completely clueless, but whatever. So that was bad. You should take your time to speak. I think that's good, and you don't let people do that. And another thing was you don't take your W's and you don't claim the W's. So I'll give you 2 examples, okay, or 3 examples actually. Right? One would be when someone talks about how they would rape you in detail. Use that later in the debate. That's probably good.
Yeah, maybe. I do think you should have hit on that again a few more times. Yeah.
Yeah, be like, yeah. I mean. Be like that. Be like if someone talks about how someone is kind of smaller, and the other person is like 6'5" and weighs a bunch, so he could rape them easily. I think that's like you could mention that somehow. It's on you, but you could use that. That's one example. The other example is when he calls like when he spurged out completely when you started doing reductios on the system because he knows he will lose when he do that. So, but no, that's you're laughing, but you should have done that more, right? You should have been like, look how he like just called me an autistic retard for just like giving something that everyone in chat understands is a flaw in the system. Like you see how he has to interrupt me because he is afraid of what I have to say. Like do something like that. Do something like that. That's so forceful, and you completely give it up. I don't like that you do that. That's the second thing. The third thing is when you had the W about the twin rape thing, you mentioned that in the end. You should have mentioned that more. You should have been like, you also mentioned that in the middle. I think you actually did that a fair amount. I would have done it even more. I just really love claiming W's, okay? And I think that's good. So, like when you do the conjoined tween rape thing, and he has to be like, wait, I have to think. I have to get back to you on that. I have to read what other philosophers, what other libertarians have to say. I would be like I would claim the W even more, and I would be even more forceful when I claim the W. So, for example, I would be like, well, first of all, you see how my system solves it completely easily and his doesn't, and you did say that. But I would also be like, and also, see how libertarianism is a fucking cult? He doesn't say, oh, I have to reason about it from first principles and whatnot, because it's all a joke. They never did. He said, I just have to read what my flock has to say, because it's a cult. That's what they do. That's what they all do. Like, that's something like that. That would have made him nuts. That would have made him go nuts, okay? So there's that as well. And also, I mean, so that's the second thing. That's the third thing. Take more of your W's. Fourth would be you just completely wasted your end, like your last time, right? As well.
I don't feel like I did that. Okay.
He spoke for longer.
Oh, that's true.
Waste every second, but maybe not. Maybe not. I need to watch it again. I was fighting with people in chat. There's that as well. I would have highlighted more how all the facts he mentioned in the beginning are not relevant to your system, even in the middle, right? Because when you mention a bunch of empirics and it's about a different system, like he was talking about single pair in the UK, but actually multi-pair, like Germany, Israel, and the Czech Republic have lower waiting times than the United States.
Yeah.
So there's that as well. I think you did good on the empirics on the economics, and also also another thing, you need to identify what's working and what's not working. Okay, and that you kind of have to get the feel for that. So like for example, if I'm talking to someone who's like completely economically clueless, I'm gonna talk economics. Right? If they know a lot of philosophy but zero economics, I'm gonna go economics. But if they know, like, if they're retarded on both, I'm gonna take the W's on philosophy because that's easier to communicate with people, right? But if they know a lot of philosophy, if they know a lot of economics, I'm gonna do a lot of philosophy, right? So you should like find which path is like W maximizing. So for example, when you did the twin thing,
right,
that was a W. You should have done more reductios. You should have been like, okay. And again, the flagpole thing, you didn't explain at all how it's not moral. In fact, you said a right could never be violated. That means it is immoral to not hang to the flagpole. It's just you violating someone's rights knowingly. And you think you should do that? You think you shouldn't? You think you should? Hey Scott, please answer. Right? Be like super aggressive about it. Right? Like that would be so good. And also about like the gun, right? Like, oh, let's say there's a zombie apocalypse and someone has a gun and he says like, no, I will never give it to you. I want to watch you die, right? And it's my gun. Of course, he doesn't have the right to say that. You have the right to steal his gun and defend yourself and save your family. That's what you should do. That's your right, right? Obviously, that's what you should do, right? And then, yeah. So there's that. I think, yeah. So I mean, like. I don't like nice debating. I don't like letting people talk over me. I don't like doing that. That's why I
gotta be mean. I gotta interrupt more. God damn it.
Can I yell at him now, Sample?
It's not just even interrupting. It's like when people interrupt you, take advantage of that. Be like, oh, he has to interrupt me because if I talk for, like, God forbid I talk more than 1 minute, everyone would know he's insane. So he has to shut me down, right? Like, be like that. Be like the underdog. People love that.
Okay, can I yell at you now, Nonfon?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Lay it on me.
Okay, I wrote some notes. I might hit you with some more, but I did take notes because I was streaming and reacting, and I was holding my head in my hands half the time. Okay, Jesus Christ, man, can you not bite bullets so easy? I know that you know, like, I know you're knowledgeable enough in this to know that you have to bite these bullets, but like, bite them a little, man. You can't you can't admit to like letting slavery happen and let that be the last thing the audience sits on. Like, can you do some?
Not even what he does. Like, you just said, I'll be okay with slavery. No. You should be very clear about that. You should be like, I will be okay with slavery if it saves way more lives, right? Left utility.
Yeah.
Well, didn't I say that? I literally said, like, if you just presuppose it that it's utility maximizing, like, sure.
Well, yeah, but okay.
And you were like, yeah, I would bite the bullet that slavery is good. Like, no, be like highlight how like look.
Yeah,
first
yeah.
of all, let me caveat a little bit because this is a very controversial and
Exactly,
contentious
yeah.
topic. Like, look, first of all, waste a bunch of time to like let everyone know you disagree with slavery, right? Because like some people are retarded in chat, so you have to like cater to them. To be like, well, first of all, let me just take make a few clarification because it's a very contentious topic. It affected
Okay.
a lot of people. So I think slavery, obviously, like terrible. If you do it like if you concoct slavery in such a way that it's utility maximizing, which it's super unrealistic. I don't have any idea. Like maybe to save like 5 cancer children or something, because like yeah, maybe then maybe you should, right? Or also we all acknowledge to some extent that like people's labor is not ultimate, right? Like if you had to enslave someone for one day to save, I don't know, a family of 10, probably you should, right? Like,
Yeah,
so
sure.
there are examples, right? Like, so be like that, like, yeah, in some extreme cases I don't think they're realistic at all. And notice that the hypotheticals I gave are very realistic, right? So if someone is invading your
Well,
home and your brother
raping
has
of
a
a
gun,
like a Siamese twin. I don't know if his hypotheticals were very realistic as well.
also, yeah, you should have amended. So the rape was, I think it was a good thing because it's very emotional.
Oh,
But also,
can I get to my list
yeah,
first?
yeah, go.
Okay, thank you. Because the other thing, we jumped in, I didn't even get to finish my point on the slavery. Yeah, but it's exactly what Sample said. Yeah, you need to do like some hedging. Like obviously, like I'm against it, or obviously, like we know this is bad, or obviously, like this will never be something that could utility maximize. Like I think you bit it too quickly because like you know that obviously that is a bullet you have to bite because you are knowledgeable in the subject. Until other people that are like knowledgeable in philosophy, they're like, yeah, this is a bullet they have to bite. But obviously, this bullet's like ridiculous because why would this ever be utility maximizing, right? But for other people who don't, like for people who aren't thought out in philosophy, it just seems like you were just like, yeah, if slavery was good, it's good. Like I have no principled stance against it. That's what it comes off as. And then you wouldn't respond. I understand. Okay, your mother said to be nice. That is okay. I respect it. Okay, but you kind of let you let them go too quickly, and you wouldn't point them out. I'll call this I call this the destiny tactic. Okay, it's when because I've seen him do this the most. When something happens, that's like a cringe debate tactic. He'll just say for the audience or for the judges, like notice how he has to like ad hom, or notice how he has to interrupt me, or notice how you didn't do that any time. You just kind of let him attack you and
No,
just
yeah,
like
I
let
did.
it slip
Well,
by.
I didn't do any ad homs, but I did point out with that, like when he says morally unjustified, he's not talking about an ought statement. He's talking about an is statement, and like it's completely useless. It's totally
No,
irrelevant.
I'm talking about whenever he was insulting you. Like you didn't say, look, like
That
to
is
the
true,
judges,
but
he
yeah.
has to insult me, or look, and he can't even let me get my. The famous Destiny one is like, he's too afraid to let me say my point. Like you should say that. Like he's too afraid to let me get to my point, or he's too afraid to see what I have to say.
Also, the stuff you say, when you say stuff, it's like very. Look, I think there is a benefit and I think there is cost to it. So when you say, "Oh, you're baking in your entitlement theory," I think it makes you sound knowledgeable. But you should also a few times make it clear to people who don't know what you're talking about, what you are talking about, right?
Sure.
So I think you did that a fair amount. I mean, like, look, there's only so much you can say when your opponent is interrupting you all the time. So I don't blame you that much. But you need to find a strategy to get to talk more, right? Like it's impossible that he just gets to interrupt you, talk for a minute, then you say 2
Appeal to
sentences.
moderation.
Yeah, be like, yeah, unironically, be like, hey, judges, I
Yeah,
mean,
you should have.
look how much he interrupts me. Isn't that like totally
Can we do
crazy?
timed
I mean,
responses? Can we do? Yeah.
yeah.
I don't want to do
Or like,
time.
yeah.
That's cringe, bro.
I know.
That's
No.
not debate,
The
bro.
idea is being. I don't think you say that and shoot for timed responses. The idea is saying, look how much he has to interrupt me. Like, can you? You're basically saying like, can you help me get my point across, or help me like be able to speak?
Also, I agree. I agree. It's kind of cringe to like be like mods. So be like, hey guys, I hate to do this. This is kind of cringe, but like, dude, he's like totally unhinged. Can I finish a sentence?
True. Yeah.
Like, yeah, be like that.
Also, you're literally we're facing like the most debate bro tactics. You got to be a little cringe in response to point out the debate bro tactics. Like pointing out debate bro tactics is pretty cringe. Like it's cringe to be debating something. Like, sir, you're doing a straw man foul. Like, yeah, of course that's cringe.
Yeah, and
But
also,
at some point,
here's important. Like Fabian knows all of this. So if you look in the debate from the beginning, he went on the attack. He went on like, oh, so you have this consequentialist theory, and he sounds like philosophy, bro. He's completely retarded. He knows zero philosophy. Okay, so like he was like that. He just attacked you, and you played his game for like at least 10 minutes. It felt like.
you
If you
never
were
swung
if you're
back.
from
It
the
was
beginning, where like
so.
if you were from the beginning, where like both demeaning, kind of ad hominy, and on the attack, that was good. So I'll give you an example. Well, under your consequentialist theory, it's like, bro, first of all, I've never, first of all, blah, 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 whatever your argument would be. But also, don't talk to me about my system. You believe in the fucking nap. This is so crazy. And he would be like, no, it's totally crazy. And then you go, reductio, 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 reductio. You punch him, punch him, punch him. That's what you should do, right? That's what you should do. You should not be like, well, no, because you're baking in your system. I'm like, no. It makes you sound like it's not clear what you mean. But if everyone can understand, oh, this guy just said it would be immoral to like hang to a flagpole, or it would be like this and that, and also be like, bro, stop with the platitudes about like, yeah, I would immediately convert to your system if I just read more. Like, stop, that's retarded. Like, I don't think you've read a single thing from my like, I don't know, be like something like that. I don't know. Like, I don't like that he does this, like, oh, because I'm so obviously right and I'm so obvious. I think people find that cringy. So that's something he does that you should not do. Like, for example. But yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Also, you did a bunch of good stuff. We're just highlighting.
Wait, I got one more point.
Well, no,
I got
that
one
makes
more
sense.
point.
Sure. Okay. What, Isaac?
Why the fuck would you ever have, and Samuel said this, but I just want to hit on this too. It's so crazy. How do you have your opponent threaten to rape you and you don't use that at all? Can we?
He's that's just like. Obviously, he's gonna do that. Like that's the tactic. That
But he went into
uses.
detail. He said, "I'm 6 foot, this amount of pounds." Like if I wanted to.
Yeah, I've seen him do it like 5 times. Yeah, that's what he does.
You know what would have been perfect? You know what would have been perfect? It's like, look, like mention it a bunch of times and then be like in your ending statement or whatnot. And also, guys, and I think judges should like factor this in. I mean, the guy just talked in detail about how he would rape me, and I'm not even a minor. He's a libertarian. Like, what's going on? That's not okay, right? They should only rape children. That's what they're for. Do something like that. That's so funny. Right? Like be something like that, and he would lose it. He would lose it, and it's like a jab back, right? Like he just talked about raping you, right? So yeah, be like, dude, wait, don't talk about raping me. You're a libertarian. I'm not a child. Like that would be so funny.
Oh, I should have done that. Oh
like,
god, damn.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Opportunity costs. But yeah. Yeah. Either way. Look, I think you did good. I think it's just the chat, like very biased.
Rigged. Well, people, it was the anti-egalitarian libertarian chat. Okay, where money is a vote. Okay, $1, 1 vote. Rigged.
No, it wasn't rigged. I pointed it out. His vote tally wasn't.
His vote tally was like the actual people, not the channel points or whatever.
Also, I obviously voted for you in the chat vote, but I probably would have voted for him as well. I won't lie to you, Nonfon.
Rigged.
Just rhetorically, you let him just get so much by you. It's the same thing with that other debate. That annoyed me so much, Nonfon. Oh my god, can we talk about this?
Wait, what other debate?
I texted you in the middle of it, and I was like, listen, I'm just sending you this because it's so retarded. Okay, why the fuck was that one dude like? It's 2011. Why would he have any idea to run for president in 2011? 2011. Yes, he has eyed the presidency. He ran in 2012. He ran in 2000.
Wait, Isaac. But that's beyond. Like you need beyond reasonable doubt. He would just be like, we have reasonable doubt.
The point was that here's what I'm trying to say. The point was that the dude was saying why Donald Trump wasn't even running for presidency in 2011. So why would that be the cause when he was? Another dude didn't hit him on that. He never responded to that.
Running for president in 11. Oh.
He ran in 2000. He ran in 2012. Is it crazy to suppose the idea that he also the next year? So he was basically running in 2011. He was running in that election years.
Also, wait, but there's reasonable doubt. What I think the guy did well. I think the guy was like, well, I think he should have lost, but the guy was like, well, he didn't violate finance law, and also he should have. The problem with the guy is that he didn't go back to the law enough. He was like, first of all, he should have done this. The other guy, the clock guy, Liberal Cluck, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
He should have been like this. First of all, let us all recognize this is a decided case. It's already been in court. It's already been in a jury. It's already been to a judge, and it's been decided with a jury of 9 of his peers that he was guilty. So our priors, all of us, no matter how much you like Trump, should be very low, and the burden of proof for Lactoid should be very high. He cannot just raise bias concerns. He should not do it. That's what he should do. He should
Thank you for the raid, Gibbs. I appreciate it.
I have no for me, I don't have to present a strong argument, but he does. That's kind of.
That's just our standing point, right? Like that should be like, you should just be like, hey, the opposition, they have a very high burden of proof, and then make your case, be like explicit, cite law and whatever. But like, if you start by saying, look at how high the burden of proof for my opponent is, that's good for you. That's always good for you.
Econoboi, they're telling me I have Econoboi syndrome right now.
What is Econoboi famous for the same thing?
Yeah, Econoboi is too nice.
Econoboi syndrome is when you're too nice in debates and you let people
nice.
Nonfon cucked himself today. It was
Nonfon just had a debate with Fabian Liberty about healthcare as a human right.
I was gonna ask, how did it go?
Not good.
No, I think it went okay. It's just like he lost. I think it went good. I think it went okay, but he lost. That's why.
Nonfon.
Well, they don't like that I let him talk over me too much. Apparently.
Econoboi.
Well,
Look,
I'm
look,
more on
that's
the
just
ad
not a-
homs, but yeah.
among 5 other things. Look,
Well, I
Econoboi,
didn't
here's
ad
an
hom
example.
him.
Okay? Here's an
My
example.
apprentice
Fabian
failed, and I'm
Liberty-
gonna have to come out of retirement and debate one last ANCAP.
Look, boy of economics. Look, listen. I don't full name. I know. But either way. Look, so yeah. But either way, there was a point in the debate where Fabian Liberty, he's retarded. He was like bringing this point of like, you believe might makes right because you're like whatever consequentialist, whatever, blah blah blah, right? And what he did as an example, he chose the worst hypothetical he could. It was like, well, look, I'm 6'5", I'm pretty strong, whatever. I could rape you easily. Like I'm pretty big. I could rape. Like he was talking for like a solid 10 seconds or a little more about how he could easily rape Nonfon. And he was like, well, I could also make you my slave and make you like it. And in that world, that would maximize utility, kind of, right? So like he was making the worst hypothetical. And what Nonfon did, he kind of answered, he kind of made fun of it. But that's something so unhinged. You should make the entire debate about that, right? You should be like, I thought what Nonfon should have said was like, dude, why are you talking about raping me? I'm not even a child. You're a libertarian, right? Like that make a
Thanks
joke.
everyone
make
for
him
following,
like
by the way.
But
Listen,
he didn't.
You can't be funny on the fly. You gotta just think it. These are just
A
things you
little
can think
bit.
of in hindsight. You
Try
have to.
use it again and again.
You just gotta be very active.
But dude, if your opponent talks about it in detail, I don't think he threatened it or anything, but like he talked in
Nonfon.
detail about raping.
Well, he
him,
just said like
come on.
This is why pure consequentialism is dumb. You have to be a pluralist, you know?
No.
Right.
No. Look. I think consequentialism is right. I think act
Oh my
utilitarianism,
God.
not rule utilitarianism, is the right theory. But also, look.
No, but
if
you can have
if
you can
want-
have utility as one value amongst a set of values.
Yeah, I agree. You could. You shouldn't. But either way, that's. Yeah. Either way, look. I agree. You could have like
Sample text.
multiple values. Look, either way.
Irreducible values.
I'm an act utilitarian, but if someone is a rule utilitarian, that's okay. But look, if you want to hide your beliefs or like mask it, be rule deontology. That's perfect because you get to be a utilitarian, but also be like, oh, that hypothetical. I think the thing you're describing is valid. Like there would be a high threshold for utility to overcome. So no, I don't think it passes that. That's like intuitive. People find that. I just don't think intuition is the measure for like morals. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just a big egalitarianism pilled person as of late, but
Oh, so like you would rather a world where everyone's poor than like everyone is like slightly rich.
true. Yeah. Wait,
Whatever.
we've gone way off topic. Non-fon. I don't even.
Yeah.
So wait, what were your arguments that you gave to Fabian, and why
I
did
don't
they
remember this
fail?
point. Okay, well they didn't. Well, I don't think my arguments failed. They just got mad.
I think it failed.
Okay, damn Isaac. They got mad that I let Fabian ramble for too long and talk over me and didn't push back on some of like the ad homs he was going at me. I mean, it was basically, some of it was the like Matt Bruneck stuff. It's like, okay, well clearly like when you say like, we're forcing the government to like, take away rights from people or whatever, like you're baking in your theory of entitlement into that. I forget what else did we talk about? I don't remember. Oh, we talked about he did that stupid thing where it's like
The other dude threatened to rape him. He didn't even hit on that at
wait.
all.
But the opening statement, like they had 7 minutes, right? Fabian wasted every second just to talk about how Nonfon is advocating socialism and that kills a bajillion people in the UK, which is Nonfon's system. Definitely.
True.
Right? And also like how blah blah and how that's a contradiction. Like,
Doctors in
Fabian-
Cuba work as taxi
Fabian-
drivers.
Fabian loves talking about like as if he knows anything about logic. Look, as a guy who studied like logic and like whatever stuff like that from like 7 years ago, I want to fucking blow my heads off when I hear Fabian say that's a contradiction. That's not even true. Like the guy has no understanding of logic, right? He said the statement "I am sleeping" is not even meaningful. Not that it's false. It's not even meaningful. Like the guy has no clue what he's talking about. So he did that in his opening statement, and then Nonfon in his opening statement, what does he do? He's like, and to be fair. I made this like I helped him make.
you did sign off on it, so fuck you. Yeah.
But I
This
thought
is
there was
your
only 1
fault,
minute.
sample text.
There's only 1 minute. But there's only 1 minute. But either way, for his opening statement, and like it was an okay opening statement for 1 minute. But if you have 7 minutes, you should do more. It was just like I afford like negative rights when I think they maximize utility. I afford positive rights the same, and also there are some inefficiencies when we lead a market healthcare, like when we do healthcare in the market, like inelastic demand, adverse selection, whatever, asymmetry in information, blah 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 blah, and that's kind of where it ended. And then from the beginning, Fabian, he knows that if he doesn't attack, then he would lose because his system is totally absurd. So he just attacked Nonfon again and again and again, and Nonfon didn't push back. He let him walk over him and interrupt him, and just just ask him again and again and again. And the worst questions as well. It's just like, oh, you're a consequentialist? Well, that relies on probabilistic knowledge. It's like, good, fucking good. But I don't know. And then when Nonfon went on the attack, it was so fucking sublime. I want to watch 5 hours of Nonfon just going on the attack against not Fabian, because it was like, look, in your system, conjoined twins, right? Like we have a conjoined twin, right? And let's say female conjoined twin, and someone wants to rape them. Who has the bodily right? Right? If one person consents to the sex and the other one doesn't, which is totally realistic, by the way.
Oh no!
Which one has the bodily right?
We've got a libertarian divide by zero scenario.
Yeah, well, there actually is libertarian literature against multiple people owning the same thing, but they never thought about twins, right? About Siamic, whatever, conjoined twins, right? So that's a good reductio. And when Nonfon brought it up, it was so sublime. And also, this Isaac mentioned this. Again, Fabian described look, I'm a big guy.
In detail, bro. I'm 6 foot, 200 pounds. I could bend you over
Also, he said also another crazy thing, which was Hitler killed 6 million people in the Holocaust, give or take, for the Spurgs in chat. What do you mean give or take? Can you go into detail? What do you mean give or take?
DM it.
That was me. As a Jew, okay, in Hanukkah, I have to be I have to be offended.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Fabian, I think, has pretty reactionary social views. But from what I recall,
He's just clueless. He's completely clueless. But I think Nonfon did well. He just
lost,
and for a good reason.
Rigged. It's because the voting was rigged.
Fucking Christ. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like every time I speak to Fabian, I grow stronger in my property rights convictions, and libertarian ethics is a really big pile of dog shit.
I so agree. Yeah. We can.
If you want to chat with me live, sub here or go to Nonfon420 on Twitch or Kick via the links below. Once again, please like and sub to help with the algorithm, and consider sending a donation through YouTube Super Thanks to directly support me, and I'll make sure to reply to any question you ask. See you guys next time.